It's definitely the first significant moment in my life of adverse trauma. First, really, and it almost cost me my life. And just case in point, the physio said, "Oh, you know, you're going to be bored. You might as well just have a drink and relax." Company called Clarke in London. Ring them. Clarke Carlisle, 2 bottles of Chablis, 40 Marlboro Lights, please. And I placed that order 3 or 4 times a week for 5 weeks. Sat on my own in a 2-bed flat in Acton, just above an estate agent. I took an overdose. 56 Proximo, washed him down with a can of Carling and waited to die. That was my solution in that period. Oh wow. Oh, brought you making me so It is highly unlikely that my depression and my mental health would have deteriorated if we'd have taken active steps at that point. If that had happened today, and a club reacted like that, I would batter them. Yeah. But we can't look at 2001 with our 2023 understanding. No. We can't. No. You know, because what was available to the club at that time? You know, what was the societal norm in responding to things like this? The societal norm was, oh, he's alive, success. An amazing question. And it's one that sat here in this seat today. I know that sharing my experiences is and will help people. It wasn't immediate to me why I was still alive. 2017 was the last time I was actively suicidal. 2019 was when I was finally discharged from psychiatric and counselling services. But from then, I've continued to have my own therapy because I don't do it because I'm poor, but it underpins my wellness. Yep. You know, it opens up my understanding of why I respond, how I respond. Is there a different way that will serve me better? So, we've designed the world's first academic qualification for mental health advocacy.
So, Clarke, firstly, thanks for coming on, mate. We appreciate everyone coming down. As I said to you before, I'm absolutely buzzing that we get to spend some time with you and dive a little bit deeper into your past and what you're doing at the minute. We played together at Preston.
We did.
A long time ago. Both born in Preston as well. Similar backgrounds, I'd say. I know a little bit about your background, similar to the way I was brought up. And I think what's always intrigued me about you, as when we were teammates, is the fact you were probably the first player I came across that was academically different. You didn't conform to being that cool footballer in the changing room. You know what it's like nowadays. It's cool to not study and to not be busy and things like that. And I think you were the first one that really sort of had that different personality, and that resonated with me because my life now and from such a young age has always been like education, studying, and really looking to the future. So that's why I wanted you in, dive a little deeper into that, and obviously many other things we're going to talk about as well. So give us a little background then on like your life growing up. Obviously, as I said, they're born in Preston. What life was like for you growing up, in a football sense, on and off the pitch, really.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Proc. It put a smile on my face when I saw your name pop up on my phone, and it's put a bigger smile on my face now seeing you in the physicality, because you're so pretty. Right? You know, and I don't know if that's.
I feel like I need to get out of this room.
Well, I'm saying, is it contagious? Because you're equally pretty.
Oh,
John.
thank you. I do work on it.
Is it you moisturise?
Yeah, moisturise. Yeah.
Spent a bit of money on it, haven't you?
Yeah, 20 quid for the moisturiser.
Is that it?
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here, mate. And it's really interesting you talk about the difference of character that I had in the dressing room, because that character that I had when I came into the North End dressing room was not the one that I had when I started the industry, when I started out playing football. You know, I was very conformist as a young lad. And to give you my background, hopefully this might explain a little bit why. So yeah, I was born in Preston. I lived on Newall Lane when I was born. I was born at Sherrard Green, and you call it an underprivileged household today. Mum and dad were skint. Dad could never get a job. And it wasn't because he was lazy or anything. Dad was intelligent, he was hardworking, he was earnest, but he was a 6'5" black guy living in the north of England in the late 70s. So no one had given him the time of day, and that meant that we had very, very little in our household. We moved to a council estate in Clayton Brook, just outside Preston, when I was 3 or 4 years old, and on that council estate, we were one of 2 black families on the entire estate, heavily white. Now, you're probably thinking, what's the relevance of that? Well, the relevance of that was that us as kids, we were an anomaly in that estate. So we didn't just go out and play with our mates. We had to go out and overcome the curiosity, the intrigue, the othering, the difference that we had, in order to make people like us, so that they would then subsequently be our mates. And that meant that when I went out, I very rarely had the opportunity to just be Clarke. I went out, and no matter who I was with, what I had to do was be whatever you needed me to be, so that you would like me, so that you would be my friend.
It was people pleasing.
People pleasing from a really, really young age, and that was compounded by the dynamic in the household. So the dynamic in the household was, very, it was classic 70s and 80s parenting, where corporal punishment was the order of the day. Dad only ever interacted with us when we were really good, and he'd say, well done, or when we were really bad, and he'd give us a clout. So even in the house, everything was about me achieving and doing well in order to please me dad and get that positive response. So from a very young age, rather than me just going out and exploring the world, I went out with the notion that I had to achieve, impress, and win over people in order, to be worthy and validated. And I think, I'm so blessed in, even though I'm going to say that dynamic had consequences, it also had a lot of positive outcomes. It meant that I was really motivated every time I left the house. In anything and everything that I could do, I wanted to be the best at it. And parents really, they really had a high, what's the word I'm looking for? This is what happens when you've headed a million balls, mate. They placed a really high value on education. Right. Another thing I'm so proud of my old man for. He couldn't get a job, blah, blah, blah. His options were restricted. He had to work for our local church for food parcels, but he didn't impose that living on us. He didn't fill us with the negativities of life. He said, if you work hard, you can achieve anything. And in order to achieve, you need to be educated. You have to be able to speak the Queen's English. Yeah? You need to walk like this and talk like this. And you don't just have to win, you have to be better than everyone else. And if you do that, you can achieve anything. So, that's what I went into my school life with, right from primary school, all the way through high school. I don't care what the topic was, what the subject was. I don't care what the sport was. I didn't want to win. I needed to win. I needed to win in order to gain acceptance from my peers, in order to have standing with my teachers, and in order to get that positive affirmation when I got home, and how that academically, it meant that I flew through my GCSEs, got straight A's, 5 A's, 5 A stars, I think it was. Which my head teacher was disappointed with.
as you will be.
They thought I could get straight A stars. But where it paid most, I think, was in my sporting prowess. I didn't actually start playing football till I was 11.
Right.
I played at primary school in the primary school team, but we used to go to a church called the Mormon Church. Mormon Temple's just across the road here. We're recording. And in the Mormon religion, you can't do anything on a Sunday. You can't work or anything like that, So I wasn't allowed to play Sunday League football. But then when I was 11, my mum and dad stopped going to that church. And so my dad let me play Sunday League football. And I'll never forget my first game. It was for AFC Ribble in the Central Lancs League. And it was against Coppell. And the manager was called Tony Knight. And he said, my dad said, oh, you know, can my son play for your side? The manager said, look, he's going to have to be good. We've got a good side here. Okay. Played Coppell. We won 11-0 and I scored 6.
That's it. He's in.
He came back to my dad and went, yeah, he can come to training on Wednesday if he wants. Well, that was the beginning of my Sunday League journey. And I was immediately signed for Blackburn Centre of Excellence.
All right.
So this was in 92. They just won the Premier League. Jack Walker was pumping the money in. They built the Blackburn Rovers Indoor Centre, the brick. And that was my first taste of you know, like professional club football. And it was awesome. As ever, I tried to do anything and everything that I could. But at 14, they released me. And I've got to say, it was one of the worst days of my life. It was one of the worst days. You know, you talk about someone who's used to winning and achieving, doing well in everything. And this was the first time in my life. Alan Irvine was the coach. First time that I've been told I wasn't good enough. You know, I
succeeded at everything else in school.
Everything. And I'm not going to say it came easily because, like, without knowing about work ethic, I had a work ethic. You know, I had a passion, I had a desire. It wasn't like, you know, I had this whole belief system age 12. Yeah. It was just the way that I approached life. And it was the first time that someone had told me that despite how much you've worked, you're not good enough here. And who was, do you know what they signed instead for schoolboy forms? David Dunn.
Yeah.
How did that turn out for him? Well, you know, so that was my competition there. And I had England trials that year as well. What a side that was. You know, it was like Wes Brown and Dunny and Michael Owen. You know, some great players. Yeah. And I was told I wasn't good enough there either to go to Lilleshall.
Right.
So these two came at the same time. I just spent 3 days crying. You know, I was just this young kid. My dream had been destroyed. I was like, I was just in tears. I said to mum and dad, never playing football again. I was age 14. And then a week later, a guy called Fred O'Donoghue came and knocked at the door. Fred is one of the most famous, if not infamous, scouts in the Northwest area. And he knocked on the door and he said, right, I hear Blackburn have let you go. I said, yeah. He said, well, look, I scouted your dad when he was 16. And I said at that time, I'm going to watch for this guy's offspring. And he said, so you are going to come and play for us. And he was scouted for Blackpool at the time. And so I signed schoolboy forms for Blackpool, and then the rest is history.
Can I ask how your dad was that moment when you got released from Blackburn? And like you said, you suffered and you was crying for 3 days. Did he push you to carry on believing in yourself, to carry on with the football? Or was he just strictly focused on your schoolwork and education?
John, that's a really, really good question. How was Dad? I'll tell you what he wasn't. He didn't push or direct me back to football. It was all about consoling me in that moment. You know, just classic traditional parenting. You know, it's okay, son. It's okay. Don't worry about it. You're good at all these other things. Yeah. You know, you go and do those. So there was no vicarious living from Dad. You know, it wasn't like, right, on to the next one, on to the next one. There was nothing like that. He was just consoling me in that moment. And it's really interesting, my dad's dynamic with me when I was into football, because my dad was an outstanding footballer. You know, played in the Preston and District Leagues. Like I said, he was scouted for North End as a kid, but he broke his ankle. He had England trials. His England team won 2-0. He scored both goals, but then the coach said, "You're not the type of player we're looking for." Like, really? The only black guy on this team is not the type of player you're looking for.
The one that scored the 2 goals.
Exactly. You know, so I was so not envious. I was in awe of my dad as a kid. I used to go and watch him play for Broughton Amateurs, Leisure Hall. The Evening Post had a big headline called Merv the Swerve. My dad is called Mervyn. And scoring all these goals. And so you would expect, because my dad had such a love of football, and he, unfortunately his opportunity was taken away. Yeah. You'd expect maybe that he would direct all of his energy into, pushing me there. But it was a total opposite. What happened, because of what happened with my dad, and because of how it hurt and affected him, he didn't want to push that onto me. So rather than push me down that path and put me at risk of experiencing what he experienced, he was just very quietly supportive in the background. He was at every game I played, but never was he hypercritical. Never was it, did he push me to do A, B, and C. He wanted it all to be organic. And that manifested itself in that moment. There was no, there's no debrief or analysis. There was just, it was just him comforting me.
Yeah. Can I flip it onto you now with your children?
Yeah.
Would you push your kids to play football, or like from your football career, would you want them to pursue a footballing career?
I'm just thinking the same there. Like, I'm listening to that and I'm thinking, I would want to model myself, and I try to now, exactly how your dad did there. Like, my kids can do whatever they want. Mm-hmm. I will support them with whatever they want. But I see now, whether it's dance, gymnastics, swimming, whatever, I'm on the sideline. I'm thinking, because I'm competitive in myself, and I always have been, I want to push them. But I'm thinking, I don't want to be that dick. Yeah. I don't want to be that parent that says, because I've seen it and it's horrible when the kids come off and the parents are saying, you need to do this, you need to be better. I'm thinking, no, leave them in their own path. They will hopefully see the traits that you have as a parent anyway, and think, you know what, my dad works hard, I want to be like him, I want to work, but let them figure it out. And I want to, and I try every day to be like that, because I think it's so beneficial. Like, and I'm guessing you're probably the same.
Total agreement that there is not one iota of my being that wants me to push any of my children down any path. And that includes academia, not just sport, because I believe that everyone has their abilities, and we will see where they lie as they develop. But there are two important core constituents, I think, of parenting. One is unconditional love and support, and this is the single most aspect of my parenting model, let's say. I need my children to know that no matter what they're going through, no matter how they're feeling, no matter what the result is, they are loved and supported here. And we manifest that in a number of ways. The second aspect that I feed into my children is application and enjoyment. There's nothing in my mind that is results focused. So when kids bring a school report home, I don't care what their attainment levels are. It's their effort, their application. I say to them, all I want you to do, no matter what it is you're doing, is just give your best. If you give your best, the outcome is utterly irrelevant, because no one can ask more for you of that. And in tandem with that, I ask them, did you enjoy it? One of the worst things that I see is, especially when we're bringing it back to sport, when we're talking about youth football, between, let's say, 9 and 14, and kids are being battered and they're going through in-depth analysis of A, B, and C, and it's like, you need to do this, you need to do that, and then they become robotic, and they're doing things out of fear, rather than allowing kids to just enjoy to play the game. That Sunday League football was some of my greatest memories, because I really enjoyed playing the game without that duress that was imposed upon me. But then once you get into the Centre of Excellence and the academy system, even though nowadays they're very much skills focused as opposed to result focused, that there is still an intense focus that has shifted away from, are you being creative and enjoying what you're doing? even though they're not focusing on the result of the game, they are still focusing on critiquing every aspect of what the child is doing. And I think that has to change. So with my children, I just want them to enjoy what they're doing. I want them to try new things. And when they come back, it's not what was the result. It was, did you enjoy that? Because if you did, then we'll do it again and we'll explore it a bit further. And all the kids, they're just going at different tangents, you know. Got the eldest who is incredibly creative. She's a fantastic artist. My son, got one lad, a 15-year-old son. He tries his hand at every sport, and he comes home and he's like, "Oh, I was dead good at that." Like, meh. I was really surprised. I'm like, "Why are you surprised? I'm geez." Do you want to do it again? No, not really. I'm like, "Oh, okay." You know, we move on to A, B, and C. But it so transpires he's got an incredible academic brain, but tied in with a level of creativity. Artistic creativity. He wants to be an architect or a fashion designer, and like brilliant. So once we found his passion, then I try and feed little things in. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? Da 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 da. And he's attending York Fashion Week next month, actually, as a model. Pretty little thing that he is. Honestly, he makes me sick. It's like you two.
I think he's fishing for the compliment back.
Yeah.
That's why he's
not going to get one. With the academia side from you, I don't think you got the fashion stuff. Believe that. Right. So you mentioned there, obviously, Blackpool, where you first started, and then I know obviously you went to QPR from there.
Yeah.
And it seems to me as if that's where you had your first major setback. In terms of serious injury.
Yeah.
Age 21?
Just turned 21.
Yeah, because you had England under 21s call up there at QPR. And then, major injury. Seems to me from the outside looking into you that's where your first struggles maybe started. You'll be able to obviously tell us more in terms of if you think there was underlying issues before that, or do you think that injury, because obviously we talk a lot about injury, don't we, and how much people struggle with that. I think from the outside, people don't really see the issues that injuries and footballers face with long-term injuries, the isolation, the rehab that is very, very lonely, dark place. Do you think that is where stuff started to unravel for you?
It's definitely the first significant moment in my life of adverse trauma. Really, and it almost cost me my life. So it was a tackle with Rufus Brevet. I'd do 10 of them again, but this one, I'd ruptured my ACL, LCL, popliteus, ITB. Rotated the fibula head, dislodged the nerve, ripped the hamstring off. Right knee, comprehensive. Went in to see the specialist, and he said, "Your knee's buggered." He said, "Prepare yourself. You're probably gonna, need a stick to walk now." So at 21, and like you said, just moved out of QPR, just broke into England under 21s. Everything's just started to take off, and then boom, it was just taken away like that. And there are two aspects to it. The first aspect is the identity aspect. From signing for Blackburn at 12 years of age, football had set me apart from the rest of my peers. And you remember how it is at school. You were getting days off because you needed to go and travel to this game, or you come back in and the teachers would be interested in talking about the club result before they talk about the subject that they're supposed to teach you. And all your friends see you going on this level to potentially being a footballer, and you're set apart from them. And so it starts to become part of your identity. And then when you do sign and play football, the lifestyle is all consuming. You're told when to get up, where to go, what to wear, what to eat, who to speak to, who not to speak to, what to say to them, everything, all day, every day. And I get to this point at 21 years of age where not only have I been, institutionalized by the game, but also football has now, because of the trajectory that it's taken me on, it forms everything about my identity and sense of worth. You know, I'm good because I play football. It's taken me out away from New Orleans and Clayton Brook Council Estate to now, you know, I'm on $2,500 a week. I'm playing football in front of 20,000 every week. We're on the telly. I'm playing for England, and all of these things were given to me by this sport, and it's all that I've engaged myself in for 5 years, and then boom, it was taken away, and this was 2001. And there was no kind of interest or understanding about the psychological and emotional impact of that. You know, it was just the club were interested in dealing with physical Clarke. And after the operation that I had, I was housebound for 6 weeks. And just case in point, the physio said, "Oh, you know, you're going to be bored. You might as well just have a drink and relax." You know, that was the coping strategy, and that was the advice given. So I did. You know, a company called Dialer Crate in London, ring them, crate of Carling, 2 bottles of Chablis, 40 Marlboro Lights, please. And I placed that order 3 or 4 times a week for 5 weeks. Sat on my own in a 2-bed flat in Acton, just above an estate agent's, and you can just imagine the place that took me to. You know, and nowadays there's a greater understanding. You know, we'd want players to talk about, you know, the impact of what they're going through. If not in the club, there are at least external services, you know, where we can send people. Whether we do or not is a different matter. But to talk about it and to understand the emotions around it wasn't a thing then.
No.
And not only was it not a societal thing, it wasn't any kind of behaviour that I had been encouraged to do. It was 70s and 80s parenting, you know. It was my idea of masculinity and dealing with my problems was that, should we call it traditional? It was archaic or traditional, you know, hunter, gatherer, provider, disciplinarian. This is what my dad showed me. My dad's life was so adversarial that his example to me of what it was to be a man was dealing with your business. You know, my dad was having to fight every day in order to just be with my mum just because she was white. And that's my example of masculinity, of dealing with your problems.
You're sat there thinking, I can't go and moan about my life and how I'm struggling. I'm a footballer on $2,500 a week, living the life. My dad's had to put up with this shit, and I'm going to sit there and moan about my life. You're thinking, no way. Bro. And people just wouldn't understand that. No way.
They're still living in a council house in Preston. There's me, Billy Big Balls, living the high life. Going, where? That's how I would have perceived it then. I can't blab to them that my life's rubbish. But not only that, I didn't talk to my parents anyway about how I was feeling. Why? Because when I was a kid and I came home and they'd be like, "Hey, you don't talk about our business outside this house." Or if I came home, I was crying, my dad's like, "Oh, I'll give you something to cry about."
Yeah.
You know, that old tough love, we've got to toughen him up. So, but the consequence of that is that I think that, right, I bottle everything up. I deal with my business. I don't show any emotions. Don't tell anyone what's going on in my life. And we come to this first significant trauma in my life. So that's what I do. I'm sat in a flat getting absolutely battered, thinking that I have to deal with it. If I'm a man, if I'm a real man, I'm going to sort this problem out. I deal with it. I get to, I get to my solution. But I couldn't, and I couldn't see one. And because of that, because I couldn't see a solution, and I thought that meant that, therefore, I wasn't a man, and not only that, I was going to be someone without football, and without football, I wasn't worth anything. No. I was of no value. Then I took an overdose. I took an overdose, 56 Proximo, washed him down with a can of Carling, and waited to die. That was my solution in that period. I didn't see any other way out.
And that literally is the word you said before. The identity of Clarke Carlisle, the footballer, has disappeared because I'm sat in a flat drinking. I'm not a footballer anymore. So Clarke Carlisle, the human being, might as well just disappear. Exactly. Because there's no such thing as Clarke Carlisle, the human, to the outside world anymore. You are just Clarke, the footballer. And it's like, oh, well, if you ain't a footballer anymore, might as well disappear. What is it? And we talk about that all the time, don't we? Like you said a couple of months back when we had someone on, obviously you got an injury, and one of your family members said to you, didn't they, like, oh, what you going to do now?
Yeah.
Like, oh, like, are you going to be all right? Now you can't play football. As if you have nothing else going on in your life. You haven't got a partner. You haven't got kids. You haven't got another career to look forward to. You're done. Football's done. All right, life's over. And that's still, I can imagine back when you were 21, it was worse, but I still think it's the case now. I still see so many lads who come to the end of their careers, finish football, and they're like, I don't know what to do. Like, who am I? And they go into hiding. They come off all social media, for example, because they're embarrassed that they're not a footballer anymore. And it's like, oh, nobody gives a shit about me now. And they don't. They don't. And that's why we encourage so much, don't we? That I'm not saying that, look, if you had a future career ahead of you from such an early age, you wouldn't have done what you did. There's much more deeper meaning to it than that. But it helps. If you keep your focus on football just as a job, but you keep your identity away from the pitch as Clarke Carlisle, the human, I think you're in such a better place.
That has to underpin what we teach our children for generations to come. You know, the football defined me as a person, and no one explained to me that it's just a vocation, it's just a job. You know, I had no understanding that me as a son, as a father, as a brother, as a friend, as a member of my community, that I had great value in all these areas, and they contribute to defining who I am, not just the job that I do. And it's you know, it's really important that you bring in parenting there, because at 21, I mean, I had my father, my eldest, at 18.
Right.
So at 21 years of age, I had, you know, a nearly 3-year-old young daughter. Now, I had left her mother when I moved down to QPR, so she was still living in Preston. And to my mind, me sending them loads of money each month was me fulfilling my duty as a father, because that was miles more than what I had, you know, so I know that they're never going to want for anything. Oh, no, I'm doing a great job. You know, it's amazing the lies we can tell ourselves in order to justify actions. But anyhow, that was my mindset at the point. So when we come to this moment where I've lost my career, not only have I physically abandoned my daughter, but I was about to financially abandon her as well, which totally undid any notion that I had of me being a good dad. So I'd lost my football, I'd lost any value in parenting, I had nothing. You know, speaking about these incidents in isolation, it's difficult without marrying it with where I am today.
Yeah.
You know, and where I am today, because I grew up in that environment of having nothing materially, I had a great focus on material things to justify my role as both husband and father.
I think that's fully not acceptable, but understandable. Like, because I think the majority of people would do that, especially
a lot of people do
especially
that.
Coming from nothing. Yeah. You think, oh well, I provide financially, I do
this,
and
that's it.
Like that's absolutely fine. Whereas the bigger picture is it isn't, and it didn't solve any problem for you whatsoever.
The thing is, provision for me, and it's only been these past like 10 years that I've not only understood it but embraced it and actually applied it into my life. Provision, especially for my children. And really, very importantly, in my marriage, is about time. It's about giving time and presence. Providing for my daughter, it is being there when she's in need, not giving her a present when she's in need. Does that make sense? Yeah. You know, and that's what, you know, I think is the basis of solid interactions in those roles. But I didn't understand that then. Oh, wow. Oh, you're making me so emotional.
So talk to me then, because look, I will never understand how you felt in that moment, but I want to understand how you turned it around, at least in the short term, to come back from that overdosing to then still playing professional football. Because if I put myself in your shoes and I went and did that, I couldn't then see in such a short amount of time going to continue to play at a decent level of football. Like, what was the process like from that in terms of short-term recovery? I'm just thinking any listeners who maybe have been through that, maybe are contemplating things like that, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. so soon after. I know obviously we'll go into things that happened later down the line, but so quickly after that, you continued playing.
Yeah.
And to what would be perceived from the outside was still a success after doing something so tragic.
Perceived from the inside. It's a really good point. I mean, I came out of hospital and the club physio discharged me because the club didn't want anyone to know what had happened. And he just said, that was silly, don't do that again. I'm like, oh, okay. And I didn't tell my parents. So, you know, it was from that moment, it was just our secret that had happened. But it was packaged to me and by everyone that I'd gotten away with it. It's like, right, you got away with that one. Don't be so silly again. So I just boxed it off and pretended it never happened. Now, this is where that dynamic, that work hard ethic, you know, and put everything into something, this is where it's really positive. This is where it works for me. Because that knee injury that saw off Pierluigi Casaraghi, he had the same injury, done, retired. But it didn't see me off. Because when I thought, damn, I did just get away with that. Okay, right, what do I do next? I went back into physio hut and he said, right, there's a sliver of a chance that you're going to recover from this, but if you are going to recover from this, you're going to have to work your nuts off. So it was a compartmentalization. It was, right, I got away with that. You know, like, let's say you make a mistake in the first minute and you're 1-0 down. And you're like, okay, I've got 89 minutes to turn this round. Let's try and forget about that and move on to the next thing. That's exactly what I did. And I forgot about that. And then I went on 2 years. That injury kept me out for 2 years, bro. 2 years in the physio hut. You were talking about the loneliness, the isolation. It's disgusting. You're looking at the porthole. We only had a portal cabin at QPR. And you're looking out of this porthole every single day at all your mates doing that thing that you love. And you are no longer part of that group. You know, you're surplus to requirements. The gaffer stops speaking to you because you're no longer relevant. You're not needed at meetings. You don't have to go to the match if you don't want to. You know, you're othered within the group. And it's a horrible situation. But that application and work ethos that I had, I kind of tunnel visioned into this. You know, I was like, right, I'm going to do anything and everything that I can to get fit. And 2 years of being in the wilderness after that, I did get back. And it's a minor miracle, really, that I did get back. I got back and I went on and played another 450 games, you know, playing in the Premier League at Wembley, Millennium Stadium. And that's the positive aspect of being able to compartmentalise. I was able to put that trauma to one side and with my application and my work ethic, focus on this target of making my body as fit as physically possible. And I did do, and I overcame. But herein lies the negative aspect of that. Compartmentalization is only productive and successful if you subsequently go back and deal with what you put in the compartment. But I never did that.
No, you just hid it, boxed it off.
Yeah, not only was it boxed off there, but it was also my guilty little secret. You know, there was only me and the physio and a couple of others at the club who knew that it had happened. I hadn't told anyone around me, you know, so that was quietly festering in the background.
Do you think if it weren't a secret and it was out there, like obviously we're going to skip past and go to what happens in the future, but do you think you wouldn't have done it again if it weren't a secret?
It is highly unlikely that my depression and my mental health would have deteriorated if we'd have taken active steps at that point. Okay. Well, those active steps, and this is a really important point of talking about addressing mental health. Those active steps don't just, I don't just mean if the club gave me some medication at that point. No. Or if the club advised me to see a therapist at that point. That's not actively getting involved with. You know, there's a misunderstanding in a large portion of society that if you speak to your GP and you take a pill, that you're dealing with your adverse mental health. It's not, no matter what the pill is, it's not going to fix the psychological and emotional, you know, whatever the trauma is or dysfunction in your mind. Taking the pill is going to balance your thinking so that you're ready to address the psychological and emotional things.
So it's a supplement.
Effectively,
it should be a supplement alongside other things.
Yes, that's the point. In isolation, it's no good, but that in tandem with, because the other fundamental point is getting into therapy and going into a safe space for someone to guide you through A, what happened, B, the emotional and psychological impact, and C, why you reacted like that, and then D, how you want to react differently. But you can't go through that on your own without that professional objectivity, to bring in a different perspective. I've heard people say, no, I can do it by myself. Well, the thing is that we live in a very limited sphere of experience. My understanding of what is around me is very different to yours, and especially different to those who have trained academically. So as an analogy, I'm walking down the street and I hear hooves behind me. I think, oh, it's a horse. And then I hear some braying. I'm like, oh, it's a donkey. And then a zebra walks past me. I'm like, oh, shit, it's a zebra. I never thought of that. Now, that's not my fault. It's just because all I've grown up with and known and experienced are horses, ponies and donkeys. But let's say you've got a guy who grew up in Africa. A zebra might have been his first thought when he heard the hooves. And that's what we're talking about, is you try and address something by yourself. You can only ever address it with what you currently know. And when you've got someone who's trained to look at everything outside of there, they can bring a different level of perspective and insight that allows you to think about your situations, your thoughts and your responses from a different angle. So that's why that's so important.
Do you hold any blame, firstly, to the football club?
Categorically no.
Or to football in general?
Categorically no.
Because I'm just thinking of the lack of support you've got there. You took an overdose. They've tried to hide that away, which in itself is disgusting. Your parents don't even know. Nobody else knows. You're a 21-year-old lad
still only 21.
living in London, having to deal with all that yourself. Like, I'm not trying to pass the blame. You know a lot more than me, but is there nothing in your mind that thinks they should have done better?
They could have done more.
This is where it went wrong.
If that had happened today, and a club reacted like that, I would batter them.
Yeah.
But we can't look at 2001 with our 2023 understanding.
No.
We can't.
No.
Because what was available to the club at that time? What was the societal norm in responding to things like this? The societal norm was, oh, he's alive, success.
Yeah.
But things have only changed because of people like you that have come out and spoke. So you need to take credit for yourself for coming out and being brave to speak about what you've been through, because otherwise things will never change.
No.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's funny. No, well, it's not funny, but it's interesting to say that when you was struggling with a 2-year injury, I'm currently going through being injured on and off now for over 2 years. And it has been tough, and I've spoken about it before. I was, luckily enough for me, I spoke about it and I did get help when I was seeing a counsellor. And I learned so much, and it helped me as a person. And that's why we started this podcast, because we first start back, so excited, said it before, but just to let you know, first start back, after all my injury problems, all my illnesses, I thought I can concentrate on being a footballer again, got my identity back, got the fun back, going out into the pitch, all the fans singing my name before the game, I'm loving it, getting goosebumps as I'm saying it now. And then 10 minutes into the game, someone falls on me, and ruptured my medial in my knee, and I'm out for the rest of the season again, within 10 minutes of the game. And the next day I woke up and I speak to my mates the day before, and they're just like, how is this happening to you? Like, yourself, like, just like, how is this happening? That, but rang Jamie, I was like, I actually feel all right. Like, I've done my work with the counsellor, I've done my own counselling coursework, and I've learned so much stuff, and I want to help other people by doing it, and like using my experiences and what I've been through to help other people. But if I didn't speak out and I didn't speak to that first person that put me in touch with the counsellor, then I wouldn't have got better, and I wouldn't have been feeling the way I am, and I wouldn't have wanted to help other people. I would have been in self-destruct mode and feeling sorry for myself and feeling like the world's against me and I've lost everything. But it's so important to speak to someone.
Definitely.
And without people like you speaking out and telling your stories, maybe I wouldn't have done that as well. So thank you to people like you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you can take a lot from that, knowing that even at that young age, 2 years out the game, to go on and say what Clarke did, you're still going through it now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You haven't played for I don't know how long.
No,
you've just had another setback where you know you're not going to play for the foreseeable again. But I think things like this, and you constantly recognizing the way you're feeling and how you can get out of it and what not to do, in your case, you might be a shining light for positivity for people, but also people can use you as an example of what not to do and what route not to go down. So that's perfect for you to look at in similar circumstances, to be like, look, that's what he did, and he's now saying, don't do that. So you can follow that route and
100%.
hopefully come out
and
in a different light.
I don't want to skip things because we're going to go on to it anyway. But after a few suicidal attempts, do you think you're still here to help people like me? Which we're going to get on to, but just while we're on that.
It's an amazing question. And it's one that sat here in this seat today. I know that sharing my experiences is and will help people. Equally, at the time of my last suicide attempt, or the last time I was actively suicidal, was 2017. It wasn't immediate to me why I was still alive. So, you know, that people often think that, like, let's say in that instance in 2001, that, oh, you were, you know, you're alive and you immediately knew your dream or your path or whatever. Not so. 2017, oh, you're alive and now you know immediately that you want to go and help people. No, there was still a huge amount of psychological work that I had to go through to go from that position, from wanting to die, wanting to not be here, to being well, to then understanding my purpose. It's not an immediate switch. No. You know, it's a continuum. It's a spectrum that you go along. And I just want to go back a step. You sharing how you've managed this setback that you've currently got in your journey, and talking about how you've approached it differently because of the work that you did initially. That is perfect. It's absolutely outstanding, because it's a classic example of early intervention and prevention. And I say to people, you don't get in your car, crash your car, and then look for your seatbelt. Yeah. You put your seatbelt on, not because you expect to crash your car. You do it so that it minimizes or mitigates the impact should it happen. Now, you going through your early psychological work is absolutely awesome, because it's given you new parameters with which to address a subsequent trauma. It may have hurt you massively had you not done any of that work. And it's identical in my life, you know. I'm really shy, or historically I've been shy at dealing with emotions. Emotional, my wife always says, Clarke's got no fear of physical pain and is shit feared of emotional pain. And that, you know, fed into the way that I responded to things. And 2017 was the last time that I was actively suicidal. 2019 was when I was finally discharged from all psychiatric and counselling services. But from then, I've continued to have my own therapy, because I don't do it because I'm poorly. I do it now because it underpins my wellness. Yeah. You know, it opens up my understanding of why I respond, how I respond. Is there a different way that will serve me better? And then my dad passed away last year. What I could only think of being one of the most tragic and traumatic events in my life that I've been afraid of prior. Yeah, it's been disgusting, but at no point has it been dangerous. And then, you know, get to a year down the line and my auntie passed away out of the blue just a couple of weeks back. And again, it's not nice, but at no point has it been emotionally destructive for me. And it was actually, you know, slightly easier to manage the impact of that grief than it was of that grief. And all of that is testament to the fact that what I've learned about myself, what I've learned about managing emotions, especially emotions of sadness, fear, and anger. They were the three most destructive emotions for me to experience. Dealing with those, the way that I process them, the way that I communicate them now, means that I don't have to go out in some, kind of self-destructive behaviour just to try and avoid or manage or minimise the feeling of these emotions. So, John, you are a fantastic case in point of early intervention and prevention, because this second trauma that you've experienced, instead of compounding the first one, you now have new ways of managing it, where it's you're not seeing it as a devastatingly detrimental to you as a human being.
I've got two things. One of them is sitting here now, I'm still really angry, but I'm channeling that to get me back fully fit. I'm using that every day. I'm working in the gym, every day I'm on my own in the gym. I'm angry, but I'm using it to get me back fit, because I still want a footballing career. I still want to get back and having that fun of playing football and loving the game. So I'm using that anger to help me. Yeah. And then the second thing, going back again to when he was a 21-year-old lad, I count myself lucky because I was 28 when I suffered all these illnesses and injuries. And I was living out in Liverpool, so I've got my wife at the time, I've got all my family close to me, I've got good friends, I've built relationships over the years to help me in that time where you've moved to London, you're on your own, you're a 21-year-old lad, and maybe you haven't got that support around you. What advice would you give to any player now, whether they have got loved ones close to them or they haven't got anyone, that are going through a long-term injury, that are feeling lonely, feeling isolated? What help can they get?
That's a really good question, and it's you've got to balance your responses, because people will be in either of our camps or somewhere in between. You can't just say, tell your parents or tell your missus. They might not have parents or a missus, or if they do, they might actually feel that they don't want to tell them because they'll be letting them down, or they'll be displaying, displaying some kind of
it's a weakness in football. I know you spoke about it before, like the siege mentality of big macho man footballer. Don't tell anyone, I won't get picked on a Saturday. Don't want to tell my parents because they'll be disappointed. Don't want to tell my teammates because they'll think I'm weak. Can't tell my manager or anyone at the club because they'll think, he's a risk, get rid of him at the end of the season. There's just nobody out there. And it's changed now. Changing, yeah. Because there's still, I see it every day, a lot that goes on, and you're thinking
so much more that needs to still go on, by the way.
And we will get there eventually. Well, hopefully. But it is that thing, and the worry for me is the people who do live on their own, who have moved away from friends and family to pursue this football career, and then get slapped with the long-term injury or whatever it may be. Do they start drinking? Do they start gambling? That's the worry, and obviously the advice, like you said, there isn't readily available and isn't a one-size-fits-all because everybody's situation is so different. And I think that's why the support is hard. The only support you can offer is by saying, look, go and speak to a professional and try and gear yourself up, almost like you're saying there, with the armour before something does happen. Be proactive with it. Like even if you're not struggling mentally, physically, emotionally, just do it anyway. Why are football clubs not putting on people like you? I don't know whether something you've looked into or something you may go down the line of, having a figure like you, a professional as such. I know you see other people, but you are a professional in this space, who is a soundboard for people in football clubs to be relatable to and be like, look, gear yourself up before shit hits the fan. Because I say this to people all the time and they always say, you're being negative. You are very, very lucky in football if you don't go through some shit. You just will. Like whether that's an injury, whether that's, I don't know, lack of form, whether that's financially, whether it's being released at the end of the season, whether it's moving away from home by yourself, whether it's whatever, there will be some shit along the way that you have to deal with. And I feel like every football club needs this figure who isn't just somebody who hasn't been in the football industry. I feel like you need to be a relatable figure that you can open up to. And I've been saying that for a number of years, really, and I know it's difficult to get that figure for every single football club.
I don't think it is.
Around the
I think it's like they should invest in it.
I've said it in the past.
Help them as a team anyway.
You have your physios compulsory. You have your masseur compulsory.
get someone in.
Why is
My wife
this
and I have
figure
developed
not-
that system. We've developed that system, the entire system for the whole game. It's called the champ system. And we pitched it to every stakeholder individually, to the PFA, the FA, EFL, Premier League, and the the Women's Premier League, Dawn Airy. We pitched it to every one of them individually. It was a system whereby you have 4 personnel at every football club. It's a team of 4. They're not part of the coaching staff. They're not part of the playing staff. They are independent. One is a qualified administrator, because it will all be about collating the data and the interactions, etc. But the other 3, we advised to be former players who have been qualified in mental health advocacy, who are just there every day. They're there at breakfast, they're there at meal times, they're watching training, they're going to matches, they go on the coach. So they're not someone who's here because I'm ill. They're someone who is part of my unit who talks to me about my emotional and psychological plane. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And they're there as a go-to for all things across the entire spectrum, but it's mandatory. It's mandatory that, I skipped a step. So what we do, these 3 people are a daily interaction who are for all things emotional, psychological. What runs in tandem with that over the course of the season is a 10-month curriculum of mental health and well-being topics that will only be one 1-hour session a month, but it's mandatory for the guys to engage with it, so that we know that we're talking to them about whether it's depression, anxiety, fear, or maladaptive coping mechanisms, ED&I, all of these things, and it's mandatory involvement across the season. But these guys, it's imperative that they have an empathy with the playing with playing football and with the industry, but also that they have the qualification for being an advocate. Because it's very different with someone being passionate. I want to support another person, which is brilliant, but in wanting to support another person, you invariably fail to put the right boundaries in place, professionally and personally. And because you care so much, you overstep that mark, and that's a disservice to the person you're looking after and yourself. And we see these people who are passionate advocates end up becoming service users themselves because they're burnt out, they're worn out, they don't know where to go. So we've designed the world's first academic qualification for mental health advocacy. It's at UCLan. It's a level 4 diploma. So we were going to have these people empathetic and academic, put them in the clubs 24/7, and these are the point of contact. Nothing goes into the coaching, it never affects team selection, etc., etc. But all of the information is collated centrally because football has such a transient workforce. You know, you've got a kid at Everton, let's say, who I know I've got a good system there, who's getting decent support, but then he goes out on loan to Yeovil. What do the guys at Yeovil know about him?
Yeah,
you know, the only thing worse than not having a support system is having one and then it being taken away at a point when a kid needs it more than ever. You know, 300-400 miles away from home, or the expectation of being lonely, blah, 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 blah. So when you've got a team that works across the game, men's and women's, top to bottom, and they're all connected, all the information can pass from one to the other. Right, this guy's now 300 miles away from home. He's already shown us, you know, certain emotional traits, or he's responded in these ways. He needs this specific level of care or support. So we've already designed it and pitched it, but guess what the problem was?
Said no.
The problem was, it's brilliant, but how much is it going to cost? Yeah, it's brilliant, but whose badge goes on the front? I don't care whose badge goes on the front.
We just want to help.
We just want to. It's imperative that we do more for these young people. It really is, and it's all about ownership and cost in what is the world's most affluent sport.
Yeah,
the world's most affluent league, and they're worried about it was going to cost. I think it was just shy of 6 million to set up, and then about 1.5 a year ongoing. It was around £6,000 a player a year.
And I know it's easy for us to say, but the cost should be irrelevant.
It should be.
Right. I know money doesn't grow on trees. The union, the AFL, the FA, Premier League, they have budgets, they have structures in place, that things they need to stick to. But this, for me and for many, has to be number one, and it should be right.
Well, what else should money be for?
It should.
The industry should be world leading in employee support.
Yeah.
It should be world leading. The Premier League is the benchmark for many things across the sport. So it should be for employee support. And not only could they have funded it out of their TV rights, it would have been less than 1% of the TV deal each year would put in a comprehensive and uniform player support network for the entire game. It'd be centrally funded, so it doesn't cost anyone anything. It can come out at source. And they would not only the industry, they'd set the standard for the world. You know, for cross-sector.
Yeah. Which
For
would just be
what it's like to look
game-changing.
after your employees.